Chapter 111. Fujio, who was called out, raised her head. Her silver hair was slightly curled up, giving off a cat's ear feeling. It was so cute. The driver froze when he heard Chin Mo's words. He even suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Their family's young master. The young master who had severe mysophobia, and looked at everyone as if they were germs, actually said that he wanted to drink the same cup of coffee with someone else. If Madam and Boss knew about this, they would definitely look at young master in surprise. This was not his usual style at all. Fujio raised her eyebrows and curled her lips. She didn't care. Brother Emo, do you want to drink it now? I just blew on it, it shouldn't be hot anymore. This young man. The driver immediately felt a headache coming on. A normal person shouldn't reply like that, right? Chin Emo didn't say anything. Instead, he held Fujio's hand, turned his head, and pressed his lips directly onto the takeaway cup. His handsome and abstinent side profile looked very handsome in the misty rain, especially since he was wearing a black suit. Fujio's eyes lit up. Fujio was also a natural and energetic pretty boy. Her school uniform's collar brushed past Chin Mo's shoulder, and the scene was very beautiful. Shui Yaoyao felt that the two most handsome men in the world were together. It was a feast for the eyes. But Shui Yaoyao glanced at the rearview mirror, feeling conflicted. Was she the only one who thought that sharing a cup of coffee with him was an indirect kiss? It's a little sweet. When Chin Emo spoke, his breath was very close. Fujio took another sip and licked the water droplets on her lower lip with the tip of her tongue. A little. It must be because of the lollipop I ate just now. It tastes like chocolate. Chin Emo stared at the youngster's face that was inches away from his. Only then did he realize that the distance between them was a little too close. The fluff on the youngster's face was reflected in his eyes once again. Those light-colored lips that were perfect for kissing were moist and tempting. Chin Emo frowned and retracted his gaze. Then, he tilted his head and looked out of the car window with his deep eyes. He raised his eyes and met the driver's gaze. His voice deepened, and he spoke in his usual commanding tone. Drive. Yes, young master. The driver also felt that he couldn't stop anymore. This was the first time he saw his young master being so close to someone. Even those in the military compound had never been treated like this by the young master. Of course, Chin Emo knew what the driver was thinking, but he didn't have to tell him. Treating a friend was different from treating a brother. When dealing with his younger brother, he would try his best to give in to him. Even if there were times, Almighty Chin still wanted this guy to stay away from him, so that he wouldn't be flirting with him all the time. Fujio blinked and looked at the Almighty's expression. She cupped her chin with her left hand and smiled wickedly. Brother Emo was indeed vulnerable to flirting. But soon Fujio wasn't that happy anymore. Anyone who had been to a proper tennis court would know that the temperature inside was neither too high nor too low. There would be specialized people who would hand towels and tea to the players. Similarly, players had to change into sportswear and wear knee pads and other professional equipment before the coach would allow them to play. This was also to prevent people from straining their muscles during the game. Wearing knee pads was fine, but going into the men's clothing department to change into sportswear. Fujio, words for the readers, when you're outside, give 7 boys a small theater. Chin Emo sneered. Classmate Shui, don't you think you're redundant? Fujio. Chapter 112. It was really inconvenient for Fujio. With one hand in her pocket, she paused and looked sideways at Shui Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao actually didn't want to change her clothes, mainly because of her figure. She probably couldn't fit into the clothes here. However, Shui Yaoyao still underestimated the influence of Chin Mo's name in the 3 northeastern provinces. In Jiang City, any business like this would be more or less owned by the Qin Corporation. So here, they were all treated like VIPs. The receptionist standing next to them was very pretty, and she was wearing a professional suit. She said to her, Miss Shui, we have prepared your sportswear. Please come this way. After that, the receptionist bowed to Chin Emo and left with her people. It was Shui Yaoyao's first time in a place like this, so she was a bit reserved, so she didn't notice anything wrong with Fujio. Other than the receptionist, Only Fujio and Chin Mo were left in the luxuriously decorated hall. The men's locker room was not far from their left. Fujio was still thinking about what excuse she could use. Chin Mo had already put one arm around her neck and brought her into the room. His left hand didn't forget to grab the sportswear from the receptionist's hands. CEO Chin had a habit of never letting anyone serve him when he entered a place like this. Even if it was just changing clothes, he would let the receptionists wait outside. Even though they were treated like VIPs, there was only one locker room. Fujio looked around as soon as she entered the room. Except for the open cabinet, which served as a little bit of cover, the rest of the place was empty. If she changed her clothes here, her gender would be exposed in less than 3 seconds. In fact, when Chin Mo said he was going to play basketball, Fujio was already prepared for physical contact. Today, she wrapped a circle of bandages around her chest and wore a pure white hurdle vest. But even so, she couldn't strip naked in front of a god, right? Fujio hugged the black sportswear that the man gave her. Her beautiful eyebrows furrowed, and even her eyes darkened. Chin Mo had already given his windbreaker to the receptionist when he came in, so he only had his suit on. He unbuttoned his shirt with one hand and turned his head to look at Fujio. The corner of his mouth curled up, and he couldn't hide his handsome asceticism. "What? Do you want me to help you take it off?" Fujio knew that the Almighty was picking on her first gay meetup. It seemed like it was impossible to use the same trick again. The current Almighty was fundamentally different from the man she had first met, who still knew how to do gay meetup tutorials. The only difference was that he really treated her as his little brother. Still not moving? With a tug of his long fingers, he threw the shirt into the wardrobe. He took out a lighter and lit a cigarette. As the smoke rose, only his perfect upper body could be seen. Every inch of his abdominal muscles was sexy. He was only wearing a pair of black handmade trousers. The tailored trousers made his legs look especially slender. The black belt around his waist had been untied and pinned to the side. It was sexy and lethal. Chapter 113. Fujio smiled and looked up at Chin Mo. Her eyes were too beautiful. Then, she tiptoed and moved her thin lips close to Chin Mo's left ear. She said in a seductive voice, "Brother Mo, if you want to see me undressed so badly, I will think that you are interested in me." Chin Mo's eyes darkened, and he pulled the young man away. Fujio lost her balance and almost hit the clothes rack behind her. Chin Mo reached out in time and pulled the young man back. His face was obviously a little cold, but he also had a faint smile on his face. "Where did you learn these words from?" Fujio saw that the man didn't want to let go of her. The fragrant cigarette smell lingered in her nose, but she wasn't in a hurry. She said lazily, "I went to nightclubs a lot and I learned it. Brother Mo, you know my reputation." "You had a reputation?" Chin Mo's eyes darkened. He stuffed the unfinished cigarette into the young man's mouth, reached out his hand, and patted the little face that made him angry and hateful. His voice was still light, but it was irresistible. "Get over there and change your clothes. Next time you talk in my ear, I will tear you apart." Fujio believed in the Almighty's ability to do what he said, especially when it came to disciplining her. As the Almighty's little brother, there were a lot of things she had to be careful of. But fortunately, after the Almighty pushed her away, he seemed to dislike her approaching. He changed his clothes faster, as if he was saying, "Hurry up and get over here." From start to finish, the Almighty was cold and aloof, but his face was indeed handsome. Even when he was wearing sportswear, he still looked like the main characters in comics, handsome and noble beyond belief. Fujio looked at the back of that person walking out, and secretly let out a sigh of relief. She walked to her clothes, threw her school jacket aside, and then bent down to take it off. Fujio took off her clothes in a handsome and fast way. But what she didn't expect was that when she took the sportswear and was about to put it on, there was a click. The door to the changing room was opened. The man leaned elegantly against the door frame and looked at her calmly. He raised his brows. "Is this why you didn't want to change your clothes just now? Is it because you're too thin?" Jinwon raised her eyebrows. "Is this the reason why you didn't want to change your clothes just now?" Fujio was extremely glad that she hadn't closed the wardrobe just now. The half-open door was just enough to cover her chest area. Realizing that the man was walking towards her, Fujio quickly put the top over her head and pulled it up to her waist. The man walked to her side, pulled her over with one hand, combed her messy hair, and looked at her with deep eyes. "What are you panicking about?" Fujio lowered her eyes and deliberately lowered her voice. "I'm afraid that Brother Imo will laugh at me if he sees me. My body isn't as good as yours. It's shriveled too pale, and I don't even have abs." Hearing the youngster's words, Chinmo's fingers paused. When he was the youngster's age, he seemed to be very mindful of his own figure. No wonder this guy had been throwing a tantrum since the beginning and refused to take off his clothes. So it was the rebellious side of puberty at work. This was something Chinmo could understand. In his opinion, the youngster was good in all aspects except for flirting. It was okay to be a little rebellious, and this little rebellious was related to the youngster's self-esteem. As an older brother, he should give the youngster more privacy. Chapter 114. If Secretary Liang knew what Chinmo was thinking right now, he would be glad that his CEO finally realized that he wasn't related to Chinmo by blood. But this kind of awareness seemed to be more like a younger brother complex. Chinmo didn't think that he was leaning towards the young man at all. He looked at Fujio with his deep eyes and said in a calm voice, "You're not manly at all. Come out and run a few more laps later." As he said that, he turned around and played with the black wristband with his slender fingers. His handsome face was cold as usual. "Change, I don't want to watch." "Fujio, Almighty, can't you just wait outside?" Forget it. It was better for the Almighty to stay in front of her. He was too meticulous, too black-bellied, and too familiar with his tricks. If he wasn't careful, people would fall into his trap. When Fujio was a hacker, she had never met such a difficult person to deal with. If the police were all like the Almighty, she really did think a lot before doing things. But the Almighty seemed to be amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. As long as she wavered a little, it seemed that the Almighty would really love her like a little brother. Fujio looked at the man's tall and straight back and slowly curled up her lips. After changing, she didn't have to worry anymore. She had a bandage on her chest and a jacket, so she didn't have to worry about anything else. She directly put her hand on Chinmo's shoulder from behind and acted like a good little brother. "Brother Imo, give in to me later. I can't control the ball well." Chinmo held back for a long time before he slapped the young man's hand down. The Almighty told himself coldly that the young man was in the rebellious phase of adolescence. Any resistance to him might cause some damage to his soul. But the young man was too close, and when that familiar, clean and sweet smell came over, he always wanted to pry open the young man's mouth to see how much candy he had eaten. At this time, Shui Yaoyao was already waiting outside the court with a cup of tea in her hand. In the middle of the coffee table was a very beautiful big fruit plate. Coming to this kind of place was not to play tennis, but to enjoy life. Apart from the green grass outside, the temperature inside was adjusted. The brown sofa was very comfortable to lean on, and there was a faint scent of cologne in the air. Shui Yaoyao was still being reserved. Her legs were too thick, and she always wanted to hide them. But when she raised her head and saw the intimate posture of the two, she actually forgot all about being reserved. She just watched in a daze as the young man smiled at her, and then turned his head to whisper into Almighty Qin's ear. The most surprising thing was that Almighty Qin actually curved his lips. Then he reached out and pinched the young man's neck. "Don't bargain with me. 30 minutes per match, not a second less." Fujio's handsome face fell, and she was a little depressed. "Can't I be handsome? Where's the brother con? Your body isn't even worth looking at, and you call yourself handsome?" Chinmo took the racket that the receptionist passed to him and pressed it into the youngster's arms. In a casual tone he said, "Play well, don't think of slacking off." The receptionist didn't expect young Master Qin to give his racket to someone else. He looked at Fujio in surprise. Fujio was smart. She could tell from the receptionist's eyes that the racket wasn't provided by the tennis court. It was the Almighty's private property. Chapter 115. Fujio paused, looked up, and set her eyes on the man not far away. He was picking out a racket provided by the court. His slender hands were wrapped in pure black gloves, and he looked quite professional in his professional badminton attire. When he lowered his head, his long and thick eyelashes formed a dark shadow, making him look careless, like a popular star shooting a TV series. If Almighty Qin's current appearance was put on a live broadcast platform, his popularity would probably go up another level. Qin Feng probably noticed the young man's gaze, so he suddenly looked up and looked at Fu Jiu indifferently. "What are you up to now?" Fu Jiu put the racket back and revealed her handsome canine teeth. She smiled brightly. "Nothing. I just think Brother Mo is too handsome, so I want to take a few more glances." Shui Yaoyao was very conflicted as she listened on the side. Why did she feel like His Highness Jiu was flirting with Almighty Qin? Two men were playing tennis together, but Shui Yaoyao felt like they were showing off their love. But those two people were indeed a good match. Shui Yaoyao held her teacup and looked at the court enviously. Fu Jiu met her gaze and smiled lightly. She walked over with her racket and pulled out her notebook from her bag. She leaned over and said to her, "Log in and play 2 rounds first. I'll talk to you about the problem during the break." Okay. Shui Yaoyao didn't expect that the young man would still think of her at this time. She felt like she was being taken care of, and her face turned red. Fu Jiu's eyes swept over the fruit platter on the coffee table. She picked up a piece of watermelon and put it in her mouth. Her voice was gentle. "You can eat any fruit you want, don't be shy." "Okay." Shui Yaoyao nodded hard. She looked at the young man's face with eyes full of worship. When Qin Mo saw this scene on the court, he bounced the racket in his left hand a few times, and his dark eyes deepened. When Fu Jiu walked over again, she saw that the Almighty's face was a lot colder. Could it be that the game was about to start? So the Almighty's murderous aura was rising? Kickoff. Qin Mo left 2 words for the receptionist beside him before he stood tall and straight in front of the net. Fu Jiu's eyes turned serious. The young man bent his knees, and his side profile was clean and handsome. His silver hair fell to the side of his ears, and he was wearing a pair of black earrings. He smashed the ball hard. Qin Mo calmly observed the direction in which the ball was flying. Then, he turned his body sideways, and with a beautiful posture, he gripped his racket tightly and aimed it at the white ball. Pa! Fu Jiu's forehead was instantly hit. He rubbed his face with the side of his hand. His face was in so much pain that it looked pitiful. "Brother Mo, you did it on purpose, didn't you? Hit me in the face." Was she really invited to play badminton? He wasn't here to take revenge on her. Qin Mo looked at the youngster, his eyes dimming. "Since you are here to play, focus on playing. Don't always think about flirting with girls." "Since when did I always think about flirting with girls?" Fu Jiu muttered, feeling a little wronged. Qin Mo's eyes swept over the youngster's fluffy head, and in the end, he couldn't overcome the surging sense of guilt in his heart. He turned his head to look at the receptionist, and his voice wasn't very happy. "Go get the ice." "Ah, yes." The receptionist still didn't understand what young Master Qin wanted the ice for. Chapter 116. Fu Jiu was stunned. She looked at the man's face in front of her and curled up her lips into a smile. "It's not that serious." The receptionist on the side also felt that young Master Qin wasn't treating his little brother, but a porcelain doll. Young Master Qin used to play even harder, but he had never covered someone's forehead in person. Qin Mo's slender fingers tightened, and his voice was very indifferent. "You'll hurt more next time if you keep shooting." As he spoke, he pinched the youngster's chin and twisted it lightly with his fingertips. "Turn your face over." Fu Jiu didn't feel anything. She held her head high and let Qin Mo cover her forehead for about a minute. Shui Yaoyao, who was still playing games, moved uncomfortably. She felt like she was unnecessary sitting there. It was better for her not to look at the court. It was better for her to reduce her presence. After covering her forehead, Qin Mo served the ball himself. He used a lot less force than before. Fu Jiu was even more handsome than usual when she played, especially when she didn't stop on the court. She kept running back and forth, and her amazing jumping ability matched with her face. She was so youthful that it was enviable. Both of them had good skills, especially Qin Mo. He just stood there and walked back and forth in front of the court without changing his expression. He swung his racket casually, and his amazing skills matched with his perfect streamlined body, causing the people on the other court to exclaim, "This is professional level, right? Who's the one playing? You don't know him? You should have heard of the Chin family, right? Nonsense. I'm not asking about young Master Chin. I'm asking about the youngster he's playing with. Could it be one of the young masters from the military compound?" This kind of court was big, and privacy was important. Chin Mo and his friends were treated like VIPs. When the people on the other side looked here, they could only see the figure, but not the face. "Hey, young Master Fu, come over and see if you can see it clearly." Fu Ximing was short, so the adults who were doing business with his father couldn't see him clearly, much less Fu Ximing. He fiddled with the tennis racket in his hand and said, "I've seen young Master Chin a few times. Aside from the few people in the military compound, there's no one else around him. There's no need to guess the other party's identity." When those people heard this, they immediately laughed and complimented. "That's true, but I haven't seen young Master Chin in real life. Young Master Fu is indeed amazing." "That's nothing." Fu Ximing raised his chin indifferently. He was quite arrogant. Fu Zhongyi was elated to hear his son being praised. "My son doesn't like to talk much, but he's actually very good at games. Young Master Chin plays games too, so we got to know each other. Since we know each other, why don't we go over and say hello?" When those people heard this, they were tempted. Fu Ximing furrowed his brows. Young Master Chin doesn't like to be disturbed when he's playing. In the future, he sounded disappointed, but at least there was still hope. "I'll have to rely on young Master Fu's recommendation." Fu Ximing grunted in acknowledgement and glanced in that direction again. In fact, he was thinking if he should find a chance to talk to young Master Chin when he was free. The reason why he came here to play tennis was because he heard that young Master Chin often came here to exercise. He had indeed met young Master Chin a few times before, but it was always at the entrance, and they didn't talk much. Chapter 117. After the game, even the counselor who was watching from the side couldn't help but want to praise the beautiful game. Almighty Chin won, of course. Fujio's stamina couldn't keep up. In the second half of the match, there was a thin layer of sweat on her fair forehead, and even her silver hair was wet. She put it to her ear, raised her hand to wipe it and smiled. "Brother Mo, I'm going to take a break. We'll play the second match later." Chin Mo glanced at him and handed his thermos to the young man. Fujio was indeed thirsty. People who had just finished exercising had to drink water. She took the thermos and drank several mouthfuls. Once again, the receptionist was shocked. He turned his head silently and looked at the person next to him. Young Master Chin was really different today. He wasn't a clean freak at all. Fujio drank 2 mouthfuls and realized that Chin Mo didn't drink any water either, so she handed the thermos back. The receptionist thought, if you give something to young Master Chin, he will definitely look at you coldly and slap you in the face. But the man held the young man's hand and drank 2 mouthfuls casually. Then he turned his head and ordered them, "Pick up the ball." Oh yes, no wonder the receptionists were a little slow today. This scene was too impactful. Fujio saw that the Almighty didn't seem to be thirsty, so she came to Shui Yaoyao with the thermos and took a piece of watermelon in her mouth. Then she tilted her head and looked at the screen. She put one hand behind Shui Yaoyao and the other on the mouse. You don't need to be so fast for your profession. Besides the keyboard, use the mouse. When the enemy attacks, dodge first and then grab the ball. Shui Yaoyao watched the young man easily use the ultimate move on the screen, and her eyes were full of shock. She had always wanted to ask His Highness Jiao, who was so good at playing, what was his name in the game. But before she could open her mouth, she saw Almighty Chin sitting in front of them with his legs crossed. He didn't sweat at all, which made people feel that this man was naturally unattainable. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette. His whole body exuded elegance and luxury, but his eyes were so cold that no one dared to look at them directly. Shui Yaoyao didn't understand how Highness Jiao dared to put his arm around this man's shoulder. Anyway, she was scared to death. And Almighty Chin's gaze on her hand was too oppressive. Shui Yaoyao couldn't help but look down. Only then did she realize that Almighty Qin wasn't looking at her, but at His Highness Jiu's hand on the back of her hand. Did you see it clearly? The young man's voice was still ringing in her ears, still gentle. Hit me like this from now on. Shui Yaoyao braced herself and replied, okay. He pulled Fujio over and said in a low voice, I asked you to come here to play tennis, not to teach. I even told you not to be half-hearted. Did you forget it so quickly? Immersing. Fujio looked at Qin Mo and said in a low voice. Fujio touched her nose. Shui Yaoyao wanted to help the young man out. Your Highness Jiu, I know what you just said. You guys continue fighting. I'll pack my things and leave first. Leave first? Fujio raised her eyebrows. It's not convenient to take a car here. We will send you back after we finish the fight. Right, Brother Mo? Although Qin Mo didn't like the way the young man flirted with girls, he still had the basic manners, so he replied with a faint Chapter 118. No need. Shui Yaoyao quickly waved her hands. When she said this, she unconsciously looked in Qin Mo's direction. Almighty Qin probably didn't want her to play tennis with His Highness Jiu. Don't ask her why she felt this way. This was her first reaction. But Fujio misunderstood her look. Or do you prefer to play with Brother Mo? You pick one of us. Hearing that, Qin Mo frowned his thick eyebrows without changing his expression. Fujio had already stood up with a smile. Who should I pick? Shui Yaoyao followed her and said, then His Highness Jiu should choose you. She really didn't dare to choose Almighty Qin. His inherent elegance always made her feel a little breathless. Looks like I'm more charming than Brother Mo. Fujio's words were directed at Qin Mo. She smiled, revealing her sharp white canine teeth. Her silver hair hadn't completely dried yet. It was really hard to hate her. But Qin Mo's eyes swept over the girl standing next to the young man, and his fingers paused. Wasn't his little brother being too nice to Shui Yaoyao? He hadn't known Fujio for a long time. Whether it was the young man outside the game, or the spadesy in the game, they weren't that easy to get close to. Qin Mo always thought that he was the one that the young man treated specially, but now it seemed that he was even nicer to Shui Yaoyao. Thinking of this, Qin Mo couldn't help but take another look at the chubby Shui Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao felt a chill on the back of her neck, and she was too embarrassed to turn around. To be honest, she was really too fat. She was different from when the young man came on the court. Her legs were chubby, and they would definitely shake when she ran, which wasn't pretty at all. No one liked to expose their shortcomings in front of their idol, but it was unrealistic to go back and play games. Almighty Qin obviously didn't want to see them playing on the computer. Fujio was right next to her, and she also saw her scruples. While she was choosing a racket, she chuckled and said, I've been wanting to ask, why do you call me Highness Jiu? This is because the girls in school like you. Not that kind of like, but that kind of like. Shui Yaoyao was afraid that she couldn't explain clearly, so her face was still red. Anyway, it's your fangirls. We gave you this nickname together, because you look like the ancient princes, evil and domineering. Fujio found this explanation quite interesting. Crown Prince. Her. The girl's thoughts were still very cute. Then let this prince teach you how to play tennis. A lot of girls aren't good at this. In order to make Shui Yaoyao look less awkward, Fujio smiled and blinked her left eye. Then, she reached over and put her hand on Shui Yaoyao's hand. She had a handsome and clean face. Not only was her posture handsome, but her voice was also very pleasant. Exert force with your fingers. When you're playing, try to lower your body as much as possible. Keep your eyes level with the racket and the ball you want to hit. Use your ankles to drive your whole body, just like this. With that said, Fujio held Shui Yaoyao's hand and pushed the racket upwards. Her movements were very cool, and her silver hair flew past Shui Yaoyao's ear. Chapter 119. Shui Yaoyao's heart was beating erratically. She never dared to imagine that she would be so close to the young man one day. His Highness Jiu's unique gentleness could really melt people. Can you? The melodious voice rang in her ears again, and when she turned her head, she saw the young man smile. Even the beauties on the tennis court couldn't help but look over, their eyes full of envy. I want such a handsome guy to teach me tennis too. That's such a sweet smile. Who is he? I don't know. It's my first time seeing him. The beauties couldn't help but stop what they were doing. They all looked at Fujio through the net, their eyes burning. Only in the semi-transparent lounge, the temperature was low. The receptionist standing next to Chinemo didn't even dare to turn his head. It wasn't an illusion. The coldness emitted from young Master Chin could almost freeze people's blood. What the hell was going on? Chinemo looked at the court with one hand supporting his chin. His slender fingers and black gloves rested on the back of the chair. His long and deep eyes were extremely cold, and even his voice was like a flower blooming in the North Pole. Every word he said was cold and bone-chilling. Call them back. After all, he came from the military compound, and his ruthlessness was never hidden. Rest after 30 minutes. He doesn't understand this, but neither do you? As he said this, he raised his head carelessly and glanced at the receptionist. That pair of eyes was so deep that it made people's scalps go numb. The receptionist didn't dare to refute. Although young Master Chin always played for more than 2 hours before stopping, now that young Master Chin said to rest after 30 minutes, they had to rest. Young Master Gio. The receptionist actually felt that it was a little disharmonious to interrupt the young man's teaching at this time. But what could he do? He didn't dare to disobey young Master Chin's words. Fujio glanced sideways. Miss, you look very hot. You didn't rest enough just now, right? The receptionist was good at talking, and he tried to find an excuse without blinking. I haven't exercised before, and it's not good for my body if I exercise for too long. Let's clean the court first, and you two can play later? If you want to fight again, then fight with young Master Chin. Don't leave young Master Chin here to teach girls again. Otherwise, I'll have to find another excuse. Fujio found it strange that the stadium needed to be cleaned after only half an hour of playing. But since the receptionist brought it up, she couldn't say anything more. She took Shui Yaoyao to the lounge. The moment she looked up, she saw that the man's expression was a little colder, but he still looked dignified. His fingers slid across her homemade book, and the other hand held the coffee. He looked like a king. This book is not bad. Of course, Fujio accepted all the compliments. You bought a good hard drive, and it runs very fast. I'll use it to play with Brother Emo in the future. MMH, Chinemo replied and didn't continue the topic. Instead, he turned to look at Shui Yaoyao, and casually twirled the black gloves on his hands. Miss Shui, how did you get to know my brother Gio? I see that you two have a good relationship. Ninth brother? Shui Yaoyao was still a little confused by this title, but she still had to answer Almighty Chin's question, even if she had to bite the bullet. His Highness Gio and I are now deskmates. His Highness Gio is very nice and takes good care of me. Chapter 120. Shui Yaoyao didn't understand why Almighty Chin would ask that, so she just nodded vaguely. Fujio was still drinking water. When she raised her head, her fair neck looked especially long and slender. Chinemo glanced at the youngster, and he happened to see Fujio's movement. His deep eyes swept over that smooth area, and he couldn't help but reach out and pull her over. You have so much free time after school that you can flirt with girls freely. You don't need to study anymore, right? What do you mean by picking up girls freely? Fujio coughed. Brother Emo, don't wrongly accuse me. Yaoyao is my teammate and my physics tutor. My grades will be in her hands in the future. Just studying? Chinemo felt that this question needed to be answered. He looked sideways at that fair and handsome face, and he said faintly, Don't bother girls with tutoring, especially Miss Shui. She should be very busy. Aye. Shui Yaoyao wanted to say that she wasn't busy, but when she met Almighty Chin's cold eyes, she swallowed her words. Fujio really hadn't considered this problem. Shui Yaoyao's family wasn't very well off, and playing games would definitely take up a lot of her time. She probably had to cook for herself, and she also needed to tutor her in physics. It seemed like she didn't have much time. It's okay, I can hire a physics tutor. Fujio smiled at Shui Yaoyao, obviously trying to help her out of this situation. Chinemo looked at them from the side, and his eyes darkened. Do you feel proud when outsiders find out that you failed physics? Fujio. Brother Emo, Don't be so sharp with your words. This is how friendships are broken. Fu Jiu was a bit listless when it came to grades, especially physics. I have no choice. I have to pass every subject in the esports selection contest. At this point, Fu Jiu smiled again. She leaned a little closer to Qin Mo, with a devilish and flirtatious look. How about I bribe Brother Mo, and you let me in through the back door? Qin Mo glanced at the young man. 10 million, and I'll let you pass. Fu Jiu's handsome face fell. Brother, give me 10 million, and let me hire a tutor. The coldness in Qin Mo's eyes dissipated a little when he saw the youngster's expression. I'll tutor you in physics from now on. Shui Yao Yao. Receptionist. Why did they feel that young Master Qin Almighty Qin had gone one round just to say this? Fu Jiu was also stunned. Brother Mo, aren't you usually busier? I still have time to tutor a slacker like you. Qin Mo stood up as he spoke, his large hand caressing the youngster's fluffy head. In the future, leave such embarrassing matters to me, understand? Fu Jiu. So the Almighty thought that her little brother was an embarrassment, which was why he wanted to teach her physics. Suddenly he felt that studying was very stressful. What? Are you unwilling? Qin Mo studied the youngster's face and sneered. He didn't need to hide his evil aura anymore. He enunciated each word coldly. Do you want me to throw you out? Fu Jiu laughed. Then let me make it clear first. When you teach me, you are not allowed to say that I have a low IQ. Qin Mo smiled as well, looking very handsome. He reached out and pinched the youngster's chin, the faint scent of tobacco lingering on his fingertips. Do you have intelligence? Fu Jiu. Chapter 121. Then, the two of them played a round of tennis. This time, Shui Yao Yao consciously treated herself as a wallpaper. The match between Qin Mo and Fu Jiu was worth watching. But for Fu Ximing, who wanted to meet Qin Mo by chance, it was a torturous wait. He was the young master of the Fu family, and there were so many people coming and going at the door. He stood there like a receptionist, which was really embarrassing. 15 minutes ago, he had sent someone to find young Master Qin, and said that he wanted to play a game of tennis with him. Logically speaking, such a request would not be rejected, but the reply he got was that young Master Qin was busy, and he was not even allowed to enter the lounge. 15 minutes. He had been standing there for a full 15 minutes. Most importantly, young Master Qin did not give him a negative answer. If he waited any longer, what would he do when those people who were doing business with the Fu family came out? If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have boasted when he first came out. Fu Ximing gripped the racket in his hand and smiled at the bodyguard in black. Can you help me ask again? When will young Master Qin come out? The bodyguard in black was polite, so he did as he was told. But after Qin Mo heard the question, he still said indifferently, let him wait. Fu Jiu saw that the bodyguard in black had come in 4 times in such a short period of time. She twisted the black bandage on her wrist and turned her head. What's the matter? Nothing. Qin Mo saw that the young man was sweating, so he turned his face over and said faintly, Did that Fu Ximing bully you last time? Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Last time? Bullied her? That illegitimate son couldn't even bully her. But since the Almighty asked, she had to nod. Of course, she had to nod her head. Yes, that's right. Qin Mo flicked his racket and said something incomprehensible. Fu Jiu was confused and didn't understand what the Almighty was talking about. But it didn't affect her handsomeness. As she smiled at Qin Mo, Almighty Qin felt that there was nothing wrong with what he did. Since someone bullied his little brother, as the big brother, he had to stand up for his little brother. Fu Ximing didn't know when he had provoked a man. He stood outside for 40 minutes, and his handsome face was full of embarrassment. Some guests even regarded him as an assistant coach, and waved him over to pick up the ball. This scene was witnessed by Fu Zhongyi and the others who just came out. Fu Ximing couldn't take it anymore. He glared at the customer and said, You're the one who picked up the ball. The customer was also annoyed. Aren't you here to pick up the ball? What are you doing standing here? Fu Ximing didn't know what to say. He didn't even enter the door. He just used brute force to rush outside. Young Master Fu, what's wrong? Where is young Master Qin? The group of people asked anxiously. Fu Ximing had nowhere to vent his anger, so he directly said, "Scram." These people were not as rich as his family anyway. The faces of the elders immediately changed. Fu Zhongyi still wanted to explain. "This child," the guest sneered. "Huh? Young Master Qin? Is young Master Qin someone he can see whenever he wants? He has been standing outside for more than half an hour. It's obvious that he hasn't given up after being rejected by young Master Qin. I've seen too many people like him. He thinks that after playing tennis twice, he can suck up to young Master Qin. But he still got angry. Puffed. Stop pretending to be rich." Just this sentence put Fu Zhongyi in an extremely awkward situation. After the bodyguard in black saw this scene, he walked in again and whispered something in Qin Mo's ear. Qin Mo's expression didn't even change. He held the racket in his hand and said in a calm voice, "Got it." Chapter 122. A game of tennis didn't end until it was dark. Qin Mo was really busy. As the CEO of the company, he was also the captain of the Supreme Alliance. His calls were bound to come from time to time. Since the Almighty had no time to care about her, Fu Jiu entered the changing room and quickly changed her clothes. She put one hand in her trouser pocket, smiled evilly at the man who was still talking on the phone, and gestured for him to go out first. Qin Mo didn't want Fu Jiu to go out first. He thought that this guy was good at flirting, and if he didn't keep her by his side, she would cause him trouble. However, on second thought, the young man was now in the rebellious stage of adolescence, so he couldn't be too strict with him. Thus he nodded, but his eyes were still full of warning, meaning nothing more than for him to behave. The person on the other side of the phone didn't know why their president was so quiet. He thought there was something wrong with his report. He said in a trembling voice, "President Qin?" "Continue." Qin Mo put down the racket and walked into the changing room. He held the phone in one hand and bit the zipper of his jersey with his teeth. His other hand exerted force, and his posture was ruthless and handsome. Fu Jiu looked back at those smooth lines that were enough to drive women crazy and make men jealous. She then looked back at herself. In the future, she'd better not bring up the topic of comparing size with the Almighty. It felt a little dangerous. The three of them sat in the same car as before. But this time, both the driver and Shui Yaoyao were much more receptive than before. "Send Miss Shui home first." Yes. The driver drove steadily, but it was hard to enter Shui Yaoyao's house. It was an old residential area next to a vegetable market. Bicycles were everywhere. Not to mention Qin Mo. Even the driver rarely came to such a place. Shui Yaoyao was sensible and didn't let them drive too deep. "Let's stop here. My house isn't far. I can walk the rest of the way." "Thank you, Almighty Qin." "Thank you, Your Highness Jiu." Fu Jiu saw her get out of the car, so she followed. "Is it really not far?" "Yes." Shui Yaoyao nodded. Her round face was actually very cute. "Your Highness Jiu, don't worry. I will practice the skills you taught me today when I get home." "Oh, anything is fine." Fu Jiu smiled. Seeing that she had been a little nervous the whole day, she reached out and flicked her forehead. "With me as the captain, we won't lose." Shui Yaoyao covered her forehead with her hand and smiled. Highness Jiu was indeed very gentle. Both of them were wearing school uniforms. Fu Jiu was already very eye-catching, and with such an action, people couldn't help but look back. The youthful atmosphere was very strong, especially in such a lively scene. Qin Mo was still sitting in the back seat with the car window rolled down. His dark eyes were as dark as the cold night, and all his emotions were drowned in them. His hand holding the business tablet paused for a moment, as though he was enduring something. This time, he didn't get out of the car. Instead, he waited for the youngster to get into the car before he slowly tidied his sleeves. "Cancel today's dinner. Let's go back home." The driver returned to the main family? But there was someone else in the car. Did young master forget to send ninth young master home? Fu Jiu paused a little and raised her eyebrows. "What about me?" Qin Mo tilted his head and smiled, but he didn't look very happy. He patted the youngster's cheek with his black-gloved right hand. His breath was like the north wind in winter, cold to the bone. Chapter 123. Go home with the Almighty. Fujio thought about it, and there was nothing wrong with that. There should be a lot of good computer parts in the Almighty's house. Okay, after we get there, we can visit Brother Mo's room. Fujio said it casually, but after the driver heard what his young master said, he was shocked. Young master was going to bring someone from outside the compound home? This was something that had never happened before. Even when young master was in school, he didn't invite anyone home. Although young master's tone just now didn't sound like an invitation, but like he was looking for trouble. But it was enough to make people feel like it was a dream. The car didn't go fast, and Fujio could see the special signs of the military compound along the way. This kind of place was usually quiet in the middle of the hustle and bustle. Vehicles going in and out had to be checked, and ordinary people couldn't get in at all. Every day, there were special armed soldiers standing guard, and they were the most powerful people. In her previous life, it wasn't that she hadn't been to such a place. It was just that at that time, she was still the #1 player that all the intelligence agencies wanted to capture. As soon as Chinemo got out of the car, all the soldiers in military uniforms raised their arms with a whoosh. It really made people feel that this place was different from the outside world. Young master. A middle-aged woman dressed like a servant came up to him. Chinemo pulled Fujio over with one hand, and his voice was very calm. Auntie Zhang, Fujio, this is my brother. He will come often in the future, so you can arrange things accordingly. Auntie Zhang was stunned. She had worked for the Fu family for so long, and since when did young master have a brother? Boss and madam probably didn't know. Fujio still wanted to talk to Auntie Zhang, and that charming and evil smile appeared. But Almighty Qin grabbed her wrist. Don't flirt with people, understand? I'm just saying hello. Chinemo tightened his grip, and his voice was very calm. You can't even say hello, go upstairs. Fujio was sucking on the lollipop, and she was a little depressed. Almighty Qin, as her brother, was he too strict with her? Chinemo entered the room, threw his jacket on the sofa, and unbuttoned his shirt with his left hand. He raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man with a domineering and ruthless look. Do you think I'm strict with you? Fujio also sat down and yawned lazily. A little. Chinemo glanced at the youngster's head that was so close to him. Somehow, the coldness in him receded a little, and his entire body was filled with elegance. Let's talk about something men talk about. Fujio. A conversation between men? It wasn't appropriate for her to chat with him. She was not a man. To be honest, Brother Mo, you've got the wrong person. Do you want to fall in love now? Seeing the youngster's listless expression, Chinemo felt that his tone was too harsh. After all, he shouldn't treat his younger brother like a subordinate. So he added, I'm not against puppy love, but you should focus on your studies now. Fujio was confused. She didn't want to be in a relationship. Stay away from girls in the future. Seeing that the youngster didn't look up, Chinmo's voice softened. Before falling in love, you should at least pass the test, right? Last place, huh? Fujio couldn't help but raise her arm and place it on the man's shoulder. Her eyes were very beautiful. Brother Mo, why don't we talk about how to be a good brother? Chapter 124. Usually at this time, no one dared to mess with Chinemo, but Fujio was different. In her eyes, nothing was scary. It would be better if you could be a little more tolerant. I haven't thrown you out yet. I'm already being very tolerant. Chinemo glanced at the youngster's hand lightly, and his voice was low. Fujio looked at her posture and explained seriously, I'm doing this because I'm close to Brother Mo. I see that there are many people who are close to you, such as Shui Yao Yao. Chinemo sneered. He hadn't expected this guy to have feelings for such a girl. He tugged at his shirt and changed the topic. Are you hungry? Chinmo's lips curled into a smile as he looked at Chinemo. Fujio nodded with a lollipop in her mouth. I've been hungry for a long time. Hearing that, Chinemo glanced at the youngster. But he felt that he was making a mountain out of a molehill. It was just a good feeling, not a liking. It was normal to have feelings for people at this age. Too much discipline would indeed attract disgust. Youth was rebellious. Thinking of these words, Chinemo decided to discipline him appropriately and not overdo it. What do you want to eat? Chinemo asked Fujio as he walked to the phone. Fujio thought for a while. Spicy hot pot, with more tripe and beef, and a plate of vegetables. Chinemo didn't attack the youngster for being a foodie after hearing that. He lowered his eyes and pressed the intercom. Hello, Auntie Zhang, let's eat at home. Prepare some hot pot seasonings, spicy seasonings, and... Fujio looked at the man's handsome and elegant side profile, and was a little surprised. She thought they would go out to eat, but she didn't expect to eat at Chin's house. Look around first, I'm going to change. After saying this, Chinemo tugged at his collar, as if he was going to walk into his bedroom. Then he thought of something and stopped, asking, Do you want to change too? Of course Fujio wouldn't agree. She didn't want to experience what happened in the changing room again. Brother Mo's clothes are too big for me. Hearing that, Chinemo looked the youngster up and down. He was indeed a little short. But he didn't say this out loud. As a good brother, it was necessary to save some face for his little brother. Unfortunately, Fujio didn't realize that the Almighty was saving her face. After all, Almighty Chin's eyes were too expressive. She wasn't stupid, so she knew what he was thinking. She looked down at herself. She was 173 centimeters. As a girl, she wasn't short at all. Since her master was gone, of course Fujio would walk around. She was especially interested in this man, who had almost caught her. After all, she had been free and unfettered in the West for so many years. The police had sent a lot of manpower to lock onto her, but they had yet to find her. They didn't even know whether she was a man or a woman. This time, she was found out partly because she couldn't keep up with the tools she used before. But even so, the Almighty's reasoning ability was inhuman. With Chin with he with he with he, fu with I he with he I fu he fu he with he with he. Chapter 125. On the mainland, there weren't many people who could study criminal psychology. What's more, there weren't many who could write annotations in a book. Fujio curled up her thin lips playfully. The Almighty had hidden himself quite well. No wonder they all said that young Master Chin was someone the entire Northeast province couldn't afford to offend. If the police had someone like the Almighty, it would be hard for her to hide herself. Criminal psychology, psychological profiler, and computer expert, Fujio always believed that there were some people in this world who couldn't be compared to them no matter how many times they were reborn. The Almighty might be one of those people. Interested in my book? Chinemo had already changed his clothes. He was wearing a light-colored knitted sweater with a pair of cloth trousers. It made him look much softer, like those male celebrities in Country H at home. His black hair was stuck to his ears, and it was slightly damp. His exposed wrists looked especially white. He walked around Fujio's back and put his slender fingers on the book Criminal Psychology she was reading. The light scent of mint mixed with a hint of tobacco fell from the top of Fujio's head. It was very familiar and very pleasant. In that position, when Fujio turned her head back, she saw the man's smooth chin. Fujio thought about his height again. She wasn't short, but the man was a whole head taller than her. No wonder the Almighty looked at her so disdainfully when he walked in. He was so tall that he indeed had the right to disdain her. Chinemo also lowered his eyes. His deep eyes fell on the young man's face, and they seemed to freeze for a moment. Soon, he took the book out of her hands and put it back on the shelf. He grabbed the back collar of the young man's school uniform with his other hand and turned his body sideways to ask Fujio. His thin lips were very close to the young man's face, and his breath could hit Fujio's face. Do I look good? Not bad. Fujio smiled lightly, and it was somewhat seductive. No wonder Brother Mo could locate my range so quickly. Your deduction ability is so strong. If I knew this earlier, I wouldn't have jumped out so quickly. I would have played a few more rounds with Brother Mo. Chinemo told himself once again that the young man was in his rebellious phase. As an older brother, even if this guy touched his things, he wouldn't. He couldn't break his claws. However, he still had to take care of this child. Chinemo exerted his strength. He didn't care what position the youngster was in and dragged him out. You can read the extracurricular books later. Let's go eat first. Ever since she met the Almighty, the number of times she was treated like a sack had increased. Fujio, brother Emo, let's talk. Don't always drag me around like this. It's affecting my image. Won't it affect your image to read other people's books? Chin Emo grabbed onto the youngster, as though he was lecturing a disobedient cat. Fujio didn't deny it. I just want to see how powerful the person who caught me is. Brother Emo, what else do you do besides playing games? Make money. After Chin Emo finished speaking, he pinched the youngster's chin forcefully. Don't ask so much. If you continue with your nonsense, I'll cook you up and stew you in hot pot. Chapter 126. I don't need to chase after a girlfriend. Women will naturally chase after me. Chin Mo's voice was very calm, and he lowered his handsome face. Even his breath was on Fujio's lips. So what you said is not within my consideration. Be good and listen to me. Don't let me break your neck. That's what you need to do, understand? After saying this, Chin Emo let go of the youngster. His back was straight, and even seemed to be matter-of-factly. Fujio found it hard to refute what the Almighty said. According to the man's style, he didn't need to worry about finding a girlfriend. In Jiang City, not only girls who played games worshipped him as a god. Even young ladies who didn't play games couldn't resist the temptation of the Chin family's power and influence. And, even if all these things were thrown out, with the Almighty's figure and looks, even if he went to a nightclub, he would still be a popular cowherd. In the future, she shouldn't attack the Almighty with girlfriends, because she couldn't do it at all. Unlike the Almighty who attacked her grades, every attack was accurate. Thinking of this, Fujio was a little depressed. She was going to comfort herself with hot beef hot pot later. But what she didn't expect was that after she sat down, there was a set of chopsticks and bowls on the table. That seat was placed in front of the man. Fujio looked up at Aunt Zhang with a light smile. That clean and handsome face was full of sunshine. Aunt Zhang didn't dare to make eye contact with this handsome boy. She just kept tilting her head and looking at Chin Emo, looking like she wanted to say something but didn't. Seeing this, Fujio knew that the Almighty had ordered her to do something. She didn't beat around the bush and said to Chin Emo, Brother Emo, where are my chopsticks? The beef in the spicy pot was boiling. At this time, she took it out and stuffed a big mouthful into her mouth. Even her lips and teeth were fragrant. Just thinking about it made her feel delicious. Chin Emo only lifted his eyes slightly and put a pile of beef into his bowl with his chopsticks. This brother of mine is so bad, so of course I'll eat it. You watch. Fujio. Almighty, you can't be so cruel. You won't have any friends, do you know that? Chin Emo glanced at him again, only to see the youngster's handsome face collapse instantly. His beautiful eyes were still looking at him, his silver hair fluttering innocently. This reminded him of the youth's rebellious phase, and he began to reflect on whether he had gone too far. After all, this was the youth's first visit. Are you craving beef? Chin Emo asked the person opposite him. Fujio held her chin and licked her lower lip with the tip of her tongue, looking devilishly handsome. Brother Emo, I've been playing tennis with you for so long I'm hungry. When you were playing tennis with me, how many people did you flirt with? Have you counted? Chin Emo smiled, but it wasn't warm. I spent a third of my time teaching others. Fujio paused and stood up all of a sudden. She put her arm on the table and leaned over. Her thin lips curled into a smile. Jealous. Jealous. Chin Mo's body temperature dropped even further. He held the bamboo chopsticks in his hand and used his eyes to signal the youngster to look at the bottom of the pot. You want to become it again? Chapter 127. Chin Emo could tell that the young man was listless again. His deep eyes glanced at Fujio's lowered head, and the corner of his mouth lifted. He acted like a big brother. Will you still have puppy love in the future? Fujio shook her head and felt that something was wrong. When did she have puppy love? She was just flirting with a girl. She wanted to look up and explain, but she didn't expect that as soon as she opened her mouth, the man stuffed a mouthful of tender beef into it. After the beef cooled down, it wasn't too hot, and it tasted just right. The man was still holding the bamboo chopsticks in his hand, but the other end of the chopsticks was fed to the young man. After seeing this scene, not only Aunt Zhang, who was standing next to them, opened her mouth wide, but even the soldiers standing guard all looked at each other in disbelief. What was going on? Young master he actually knew how to feed people. Aunt Zhang still remembered that when the young master was about 8 years old, he was sitting in the courtyard reading a book. At such a young age, he was already very much like a gentleman. He wore a pure black suit with a fluffy windbreaker over it. He always had a cup of tea by his hand, and everyone in the courtyard would turn to look at him. Madame was also very happy at that time, and she wanted to feed the young master a bite of fruit. At first, the young master didn't say anything. He probably thought that Madame was tired of coaxing him. Only then did the young master put down the book calmly and said to his wife with a dignified expression, "Mother, saliva spreads germs more than 10 times faster than normal breathing. It's common sense not to feed other people with your own toothpicks." This scene was still replaying in Aunt Zhang's mind until now. How could a child who was less than 10 years old talk about the spread of germs to his own mother? That kind of scene was really cute and surprising. Later on, whenever Aunt Zhang cooked something, her first thought was whether the food was clean or not. After all, their young master's obsession with cleanliness was real. But when did such a young master feed people with his own chopsticks? Didn't they say germs could spread? Now the young master didn't care about germs? If Madame saw this scene, she would definitely lose her elegance. Fujio didn't think much of it. Nothing was better than having meat to eat. In an instant, he tossed aside the question of puppy love. Chinemo looked at the youngster's handsome smile and didn't say anything else. Since he was the younger brother that he recognized, of course, he had to raise him carefully. He should have realized his own problem by now. If she was no longer in love, it meant that she was still obedient to him. Compared to those who ran amok all day long, this was much better. Moreover, the way the young man ate was also very appetizing. The more he looked at it, the more it looked like a cat that he raised. As long as it was fed, it would be obedient. He would observe it for a while. After all, it was the rebellious phase of youth. After telling himself this, Chinemo ate a few mouthfuls of beef with the same pair of bamboo chopsticks. This shocked Aunt Zhang once again. She took out the spare pair of bamboo chopsticks in her hand and didn't use it. She felt that this day was like a fantasy from beginning to end, but at the same time, she felt happy for her young master. After all, this was the first time she saw the young master being so close to someone. This kind of young master was finally a little more humane. Chapter 128. After eating the hot pot, Fujio was very satisfied. Just as she was about to say goodbye to the Almighty in a cool manner, she heard the man say slowly, "I've asked someone to prepare the physics books. The tutoring starts today." Fujio had a natural aversion to physics. She supported her chin with her fingers and smiled like a playboy. "Rushing like this will affect your learning efficiency. In less than 7 days, your school's monthly exams will start. Do you think you can pass physics with your poor grades if you don't rush the tutoring?" Chinemo took the pen. His side profile was still handsome, and his voice was calm, as if he was just stating a fact. But even so, our Lord Jo still felt like she was being attacked. Fujio couldn't help but ask herself why she chose the Almighty of all people to tutor her. "Get up and follow me upstairs if you're full. Don't dawdle if you're a man." Chinemo was wearing a knitted sweater with one hand in his trouser pocket. He didn't look so oppressive, and because of this, Fujio didn't dare to flirt with him. The Almighty was too pure and refined. If she wasn't careful, she would be swayed by his face. The ancient people said that femme fatale was not groundless. She was bewitched by his face. Focus. The two of them sat in front of the same desk. Apart from the physics textbooks, there were all kinds of data cables, economic magazines, and the tablet that the Almighty often used, as well as psychological analysis tables. Fujio was more interested in the latter. Chinmo's slender fingers tapped on the desk as he flipped open the physics textbook with a calm expression. Fujio finally pulled her attention back. Almighty Chin's phone vibrated beside him. He didn't look at it immediately. Instead, he looked up and asked Fujio, "What don't you know?" Fujio's fingers were still twirling around her silver hair. After hearing this question, she froze again. Then, she looked at Chinemo seriously and said, "I don't know anything." Chinmo's hand paused as he turned his head to look at the young man who was still flirting with him, and raised his eyebrows. "Are you proud?" Fujio touched her nose. "I didn't say I was proud. Start from the beginning." Chinmo's fingertips landed on one of the formulas. "Remember this formula first, then." Fujio listened carefully. After all, this was the key to whether she could participate in the esports selection contest. "This isn't right." Unexpectedly, Chinemo was exceptionally patient when it came to teaching. Perhaps all geniuses were like this. In their eyes, physics and chemistry were just some little tadpoles that they could play around with. During this period, Chinemo also received 2 calls, both of which were business-related matters. The Almighty was multitasking and handled them beautifully. Someone seemed to have asked, "Boss Chin, what formula are you talking about? Speed? Density?" "I'm going to tutor my brother," Chinemo replied calmly. The other boss on the other side of the phone was shocked. He turned his head and asked his friend next to him, "When did Seo Chin have a younger brother? Which one of them is having a second child? That's not possible, right? Little brother?" His friend was also confused. The boss nodded. "That's right, it's his younger brother. He even said that he was tutoring his younger brother." Friends. Chapter 129. He lowered his head, and his warm breath blew behind Fujio's ear as he spoke. Fujio paused and looked up at the man's eyes, which were as deep as the sea. He said one last sentence, "I'm not going out today." Then he hung up the phone. When his eyelashes lowered, they cast a thick shadow on his face, making his side profile look exceptionally handsome. Fujio tilted her head to avoid this action. Chinemo didn't say anything else, and his eyes swept over the youngster's face. "Write it again." It was really stressful to have such a master. Fujio moved the pen in her hand quickly, like a struggling cockroach. The Almighty's presence was too strong, and no one could compare to him. But there was one good thing about him. The biggest difference between a genius and an ordinary person was that he could quickly get an accurate recognition. "Fujio." The youngster looked at him handsomely with his white teeth biting his nose. Chinemo rubbed his temples with his slender fingers. "Physics is really not suitable for you. Brother Emo, let me tell you something. Don't you think physics is anti-humanity?" Fujio said seriously. Chinemo sneered. "I think you're the one who's inhumane when you were born." "Fujio, can't we have a pleasant conversation?" "That's not going to work." Chinemo turned his fingers and pulled the physics book aside. "At this speed, you won't pass in 7 days." Fujio agreed with the Almighty for the first time. "I think so too. Take out your recent courses." Chinemo flipped through the magazine. Fujio looked at the physics book in her hand and decided to tell the truth. "You have to ask the teacher." Chinemo looked sideways at the youngster and said indifferently, "If I were your physics teacher, I'd throw you out right now." She didn't even know where she was studying. Fujio didn't feel guilty and asked curiously, "What do you do if you know the courses?" "Help you predict the questions." The Almighty's careless words made Fujio realize the essential difference between a bad student and a top student. It turned out that a top student could predict the questions. This was unfair to poor students like them. What was the difference between this and knowing the answer before the exam? Fujio was still a little depressed when Chinemo stood up from his seat. "What are you going to do?" The Almighty decided to be merciful and let her rest. Chinemo glanced at the youngster. "Call your director and ask about his progress." The Almighty didn't say anything, but for some reason, Fujio could see the helplessness in his eyes. Fujio thought to herself as she unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth. Then, she lowered her head to look at the series of formulas. She was so handsome. The physics formula was so ugly. It was obvious that physics was more anti-benevolent. When the director of Jiang City No. 1 Middle School received Chinmo's call, he was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. When Chinemo said the second sentence, he straightened his back. Young Master Chin. Where was the physics in the worst class? I'll call the teacher now. Chapter 130. Director Wang didn't know why young Master Chin suddenly cared about the seating problem, so he just said respectfully, yes. Director Quan, don't you think that it's easy to have a wrong feeling when a man and a woman sit together at the same table? Chin Mo's slender fingers were still holding the mineral water bottle. The reflection of his eyes on the bottle was like the water inside, with a slight coolness. Chief Wang was dumbfounded. Wrong feelings? Puppy love. After Chin Mo said these two words, Director Quan immediately understood what Director Chin meant. Yes, young Master Chin is right. We the directors have sat together to discuss this problem. It must be changed to have a man and a woman sit together at the same table. Chin Mo said faintly. Director Quan couldn't hear the emotion in it, so he asked nervously, Young Master Chin, do you know anyone in the bad class? Otherwise, according to young Master Chin's character, he would never ask about people in the school. Chin Mo didn't speak this time, because the young man was looking up at him with his long and narrow eyes that were bright and beautiful. Fujio didn't know what Almighty Chin said, but she was thirsty, so she followed him over. Seeing the man still holding the phone in his hand, she raised her eyebrows. Brother Mo, can't you get the answer? Yes, I can. Chin Mo handed the mineral water to the young man and said faintly to the other side of the phone. That's it for now. Send me the course progress later. Almighty Chin didn't think there was anything wrong with what he did. As a big brother, there were some things that he had to stop and nip at the root. Since the young man liked to flirt with people so much, then he should keep him quiet and not get close to girls. However, it wasn't good for others to know about this, especially the young man. People in the rebellious stage of adolescence probably didn't want to be controlled like this. Thinking of this, Chin Mo glanced at Fujio next to him. Fujio took the mineral water and drank a few mouthfuls. Her white neck and smooth chin always gave people a kind of indescribable beauty. As if aware of Chin Mo's gaze, the young man turned his head. 2 or 3 strands of his silver hair stood up, and he winked at him with his left eye with a slight smile. Chin Mo dragged him back to his seat. Once again, he felt that his actions were correct. This guy, he had to make him untouchable. Director Quan was even faster. As soon as he hung up, he called the physics teacher of the lower class. The first thing he asked was, Is there any student with the surname Chin among the students you teach? The physics teacher was also stunned by Director Quan's words. There is a boy whose surname is Chin. What does he look like? What about their living conditions? If they were young Master Chin's relatives, even if they were distant relatives, their families wouldn't be too bad. The physics teacher shook his head. He's a very ordinary student. He's slightly plump, and his family sells breakfast. That's not it. If it's not a distant relative, what else could it be? Could it be because of girls? Director Quan seemed to have come to a sudden realization. He sternly warned. In the future, this kind of table arrangement must be for the boys and the girls. Young Master Chin's girlfriend is definitely in there. That's why young Master Chin specifically called him. Chapter 131. Director Quan thought to himself, that was before. He didn't know that young Master Chin's girlfriend was among these girls. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said such a thing even if he was beaten to death. However, he still needed to have some manners when dealing with his subordinates. Teacher Zhang, this isn't being conservative. Director Quan thought of young Master Chin's words as he said, It's true that boys and girls sitting at the same table can stimulate boys' learning attitude, but it is also easy for these children to have a wrong feeling. To prevent puppy love, we should start with the arrangement of tables. Physics teacher. Okay, that's it. Just remember it. Director Quan said seriously. How are your physics studies going recently? What are the key points? Send them to my email. After Chin Mo received the material, he only glanced at it a few times. Then, he began to take the pen and mark the key points one by one, circling all the possible questions. What was even more amazing was that he found 4 questions from the big questions and tapped on them with his slender fingers. When you take the monthly test, you will be tested on one of these 4 questions. If you don't know how to do it, just write down the answers. Your memory should be good. Not bad. The young man smiled calmly with a lollipop in his mouth. In fact, every hacker had a good memory, especially when it came to data. If it weren't for the fact that Lord Joe didn't like physics, she wouldn't have been so miserable and needed the Almighty to tutor her. However, this man was really amazing. He could get so many big questions right. Then, he could just fill in the multiple choice questions in front, and he should be able to pass. When Fujio thought of this, she immediately became happy. She showed her white canine teeth. Brother Mo, since you can control the scores, shouldn't we be dismissed now? You can control the scores. Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. Fujio pointed at the test paper. Here, here, and here. Altogether, it's enough to pass. How can a student taught by me, Mo, only get a passing grade? The man's tone was very indifferent, but he was naturally noble and domineering. Fujio. Why did she feel that letting a straight-A student like the Almighty teach her physics was simply a trap? A straight-A student's requirement for scores was not on the same level as a slacker like her. She just wanted to pass, not to become a physics enthusiast. But she had no choice. After all, she still needed the Almighty's help. If one were to think about it carefully, there would be benefits to it. Compared to being tortured by all kinds of formulas, she was more used to memorizing the questions. Thinking of this, Fujio began to nibble on her pen again, working hard. When it was almost 10:30, she scratched the back of her head and frowned. It was already so late. Brother Mo, should we call it a day? Mo was still in a video conference. He paused it calmly and glanced sideways at the youngster with fluffy silver hair. His gaze was deep. Sure. When Fujio heard this, she stretched her waist lazily and smiled devilishly. She packed her things and was about to leave. It shouldn't be hard to get a taxi home at 10:30. Chapter 132. She was going to wear it. When did she say she was going to wear pajamas? What's with the pajamas? She was the one who was going home. Fujio turned her head and looked at the man's sexy and handsome face. She raised her eyebrows. Brother Mo, I think we have a fundamental problem with our communication. It's too late. Uncle Zhang isn't here. It's not safe for you to go back alone. Mo's voice was very calm. He crossed his long legs and sat back on the sofa. There are so many guest rooms. Just pick one to sleep in. Fujio curled up her lips. It's safe to take a taxi back. You want to take a taxi around here? Mo glanced at the young man and threw Fujio's packed school bag back onto the wooden shelf. His indifferent tone was devoid of any emotion. Fortunately, this world sometimes looks at one's looks, not IQ. Fujio. The Almighty was attacking her again. However, the entire Chang'an street didn't allow foreign cars to enter, so she really couldn't take a taxi. Fujio picked up her phone and said, Then I'll call my chauffeur to pick me up. Hearing that, Mo's left hand, which was holding the business tablet, paused for a moment. Then his eyes slowly narrowed, and there was an endless coldness in them. Is it hard for you to sleep here? Fujio stopped dialing. She felt that the Almighty was quite tired after tutoring her for 2 hours. She couldn't just leave after using him. At least, she had to find an excuse to leave. If it was Saturday, I would have gone to bed. Today is Thursday, and I have to go to school tomorrow. I'm afraid I won't be able to sleep if we change places. Mo looked up at the young man. Then he picked up the tablet and stood up. He patted Fujio's left cheek lightly. When did you become a good student who attended classes on time? Don't find such a bluffing excuse. I'll go to the company tomorrow and take you to school on the way. Now go to Aunt Zhang's to get your pajamas. Or do you want to study one more question before going to bed? Fujio. Could this alternative of choosing one more question be called an alternative? Her chest was still bandaged. She was afraid that she would be exposed if she slept here. Fujio lowered her eyes, thinking about how to reject him. There was a knock on the door. Young master, 9th young master's pajamas are ready. It was Auntie Zhang. When she heard that the young man was going to stay at the Chin family, she was very surprised. Young master was becoming more and more humane. He even invited a friend to stay for the night. If Madame knew about such a major change, she would definitely ask for all the information about this ninth young master. In fact, even Aunt Zhang herself was curious. Which child of the Fu family was this? How could he get along so well with their young master? Qin Emo retracted his hands from the youngster's face. Come in. Aunt Zhang held the pajamas with both hands, and she looked at Fu Jiu with eyes full of kindness. Young Master Jiu, I see that you are thinner than young master, so I brought you the clothes that young master wore in middle school. I hope young Master Jiu doesn't mind. Fu Jiu could reject the Almighty, but if she didn't accept the pajamas now, she would be hurting an old man's heart. He thought about He Honghua, then looked at Aunt Zhang's sparkling eyes. Our Lord Jiu only hesitated for a moment. He was thinking about how to say something so that Aunt Zhang wouldn't be too disappointed. Chapter 133. Almost instantly, Fu Jiu saw Aunt Zhang's eyes darken. She quickly reached out and smiled lightly, looking very handsome. How could I not be satisfied? Aunt Zhang's beef hot pot is so delicious. The clothes you prepared must be comfortable to wear. Aunt Zhang's face brightened up again, after being praised by the young man. She even blushed inexplicably. Young Master Jiu was too gentle, completely different from their young master. Fu Jiu was planning to continue to confuse him. Qin Emo interrupted the young man's words, and said in a very calm voice, If you like Aunt Zhang, you can sleep here tonight. Fu Jiu. The Almighty was tricking her again. Ah, young Master Jiu is not staying here tonight? Aunt Zhang looked at the handsome young man in front of her, and said rather disappointedly, I even cooked supper for ninth young master. It's congee with pork and century eggs. Young master doesn't usually eat such things. Now that there's finally someone to eat it. Fu Jiu thought about it carefully. The bathroom and bedroom were both independent, so even if she stayed here, as long as they were in different rooms, no one would find out. At this point, if she refused again, the Almighty, who was a master detective who dabbled in psychology, might even suspect her. The main thing was that she couldn't bear to see a woman who was good to her sad, especially a woman like Aunt Zhang. Of course I'm staying here. Fu Jiu curled her lips like a rich young master. She reached out with her left hand for the pajamas and tucked Aunt Zhang's hair behind her ears. I love food so much, so how could I let go of Aunt Zhang's homemade century egg and lean meat porridge? Aunt Zhang heard this and was as happy as a child. I'll bring it to young Master Jiu right now. Okay. No one could see the crying face of our Lord Jiu. Staying here meant that she had to sleep the whole night with bandages. Any girl would know that it was torture. Seeing that he had achieved his goal, Qin Emo turned around and continued his video conference. His fluent English was mixed with a few words of French. It was obvious that the conference was not a small one. It must have been hard on the Almighty, who could still find time to use Aunt Zhang to trick her in such a business conference. He was indeed a sly businessman. Fu Jiu complained as she planned to change out of the pajamas, while the Almighty was still in the conference. Otherwise, if something like what happened in the locker room happened again, it would be hard for her to deal with it. To prevent the Almighty from tricking her again, Fu Jiu went downstairs to confirm her room with Aunt Zhang and familiarize herself with the environment. Different beds meant a higher degree of safety. There didn't seem to be anything to worry about. With this thought in mind, Fu Jiu took out her modified laptop and entered the game leisurely. As soon as she logged into her account, she saw that someone had sent her over 100 friend requests. Fu Jiu opened the page, and it was all awarding you a slap of pleasure. Idol, why didn't you add me? Idol hero is too much. How dare he say that I maliciously harass players? I only sent you 100 messages. I was going to send you 1,000. I have money in the game. Idol, didn't you say you were going to carry me through dungeons and send me flying? Why haven't you appeared yet? Idol, why aren't you playing? Have you been kidnapped by the Almighty? Chapter 134. Fujio put a lollipop in her mouth, put the notebook on her long legs, and began to reply. The Almighty didn't kidnap me. I successfully moved into his house. She couldn't afford to lose on the battlefield, even though the Almighty did trick her. Live in the Almighty's house. Award A slap of pleasure sent a horrified emoji. Student Feng didn't expect that his idol would tell him such shocking news as soon as he appeared. Fujio wasn't good at lying, but since she had already bragged, she had to cover it up as much as possible. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good for her handsome and domineering image. What's so surprising about that? If I can let him sleep on my bed in the future, will you still jump up in excitement? Sleep. Sleep on the bed. Student Feng's face started to turn red again, and he said righteously, Idol, let's not talk about such a dirty topic, or we will be reported. Fujio was amused by the screen, and she was about to raise her hand to type. A tall and slender figure came down from behind her, and he said in a deep voice, If I can let him sleep on my bed in the future. Fujio's back stiffened when she heard that familiar and cold voice. The last thing she regretted in her life was that she didn't lock the door just now. Who knew that the Almighty would sneak in while she was playing games? He didn't even make a sound when he walked. Did he think he was a cat? Chinemo sneered first, then turned his face to look at the young man in front of him. His eyes were as deep as the flowing water in the dark night. So you want to sleep on the same bed with me that much? It seems like there is no need to arrange another guest room for you. It's a waste of space. His expression didn't show any emotion, but it was enough to chill the air around them. Fujio coughed lightly. This is a misunderstanding. Really? Chinemo raised his eyebrows and took the young man's notebook. He put his fingertips on it, and he said casually and lazily, This kind of misunderstanding is really rare. It's the same reason why you got last place in your exams. Fujio. Every verbal attack was so technical. Seriously, how did the Almighty develop this habit? What's so great about being a top student? In the future, don't add people in the game, even teammates. It will affect your intelligence. Chinemo said faintly as he operated the youngster's account. Naturally, he kicked awarding you a slap of pleasure out of Spade Z's friend list. Then, he moved his mouse and took a screenshot to send to the game staff, specifically complaining about Student Feng. Fujio was caught off guard as she watched the Almighty's fluid movements. She thought that baby Feng was going to go crazy this time. Student Feng was indeed angry. Was he bullying him for being rich? He had only chatted with his idol for a few days. He hadn't even given him a gold diamond yet. He hadn't done anything. Why did she say that he was harassing her? No, he had to find out who had complained about him. Therefore, after using some connections, he decisively went to privately poke the staff of the game. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't investigated, but now that he did, he was even sadder. The person who reported him was actually his idol himself. Not only did he report me, he even blacklisted me. Why? Student Feng was deflated. He sat in front of the computer and felt wronged. He sent a crying emoji to Spadesy. Idol, even if you want to report me, you can't blacklist me. Chapter 135. The man's indifferent voice didn't reveal any emotion. To prevent you from spouting nonsense, you can use my account, and I'll use yours before the esports selection contest. Fujio smiled lightly. Brother Emo, that's not a good idea. We use different skills in the game. As a hacker, can't you control different skills in the game? He handed the youngster a towel. Don't put my IQ on the same level as yours. Write down your account number and wash your claws. Or do you prefer me to wash them for you? Chinmo's smile turned colder. His eyes filled with nobility as he handed the youngster a towel. Fujio just remembered that she hadn't showered yet. She couldn't care less about comforting baby Feng in the game. She took the bath towel from the Almighty's hand and rushed into the bathroom. This time, she didn't forget to lock the door, and she even locked it twice. Fujio completely believed that the Almighty would rip people's clothes when he was shameless. It was better for her to take the safe route. Thinking of this, Fujio raised her eyes and looked at herself in the mirror. She was so handsome, but she was still threatened. Sigh. Chin-mo seemed to notice the depression of the young man in the bathroom, so he stood up and walked slowly to the door. He put one hand in the waistband of his khaki pants, and he looked very cool. His voice was still indifferent, but it had a natural sense of command. You can use the game currency in the account, but you are not allowed to add people. Game currency? Fujio's long and narrow eyes lit up. She turned sideways and opened the door. She put her arms on the side and leaned closer to Chin-mo. Her handsome face was full of evil smile. Brother Mo, don't worry. I have the basic ethics of using an account. For example, he didn't expect the youngster to open the door. Looking at the person in front of him, his silver hair was wet. He freed one hand and pushed Fujio back. Take a good shower. Fujio didn't know what to say. Instead, she pushed him back. This time, Fujio didn't care how cold the Almighty's tone was. She smiled brightly, locked the door again, and started to take off her clothes. But when she was halfway through, she still felt a little awkward. She could sense that Chin-mo hadn't left. He was sitting on the sofa outside the bathroom. It seemed like he was still in a meeting. Even without the sound of water, she could still hear him speaking in English and French. It wasn't easy to remove the outer layer, only the inner bandage remained. Fujio glanced at herself and sat on the edge of the bathtub. She stretched out her long legs and bent one of them to the left. She turned her face to the side and carefully unwrapped the white cloth in front of her chest bit by bit. As she moved, her silver hair drooped down and hit the attractive side of her face. It made her look very handsome, like a beautiful young man full of vitality. But at this moment, if Chin-mo came in, he would definitely find out that the younger brother he recognized wasn't a younger brother, but a younger sister. Fujio, the legendary gay who liked men. In fact, she was always straight, but no one could have imagined that she was a girl. Because he needed to continue using the strip of cloth after he took a shower, he couldn't let it get wet, nor could he tear it. Finally, the last layer was opened by her, and the pair of pure white jade rabbits were about to jump out. There was a sudden knock on the door behind her. Chapter 136. Almost in the next second, she picked up her shirt and put it in front of her. However, Chin-mo didn't come in. He just stood outside the door, his side profile elegant and handsome. He had a pile of common toiletries in his hands. Open the door, I have something for you. Why did he have to give it to her now? Fujio pressed her shirt and said, I'll take it after I take a shower. There's no shower gel in there. How are you going to shower? Chin-mo raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, Open the door and take what Auntie Zhang prepared for you. After he said that, Chin-mo saw that there was no movement inside. His slender fingers were on the doorknob, and just as he was about to turn the lock, the wooden door in front of him opened a little, and the young man poked his head out. He didn't seem to be wearing any clothes. His white neck and delicate collarbones were exposed, and only his handsome face could be seen. Behind him was the special mist of the bathroom, and even the young man's thick black eyelashes were steaming. Brother Mo, where are the things? Fujio said it naturally with a slight smile on her lips. Chin-mo glanced at the young man's smooth collarbones, then looked away and threw a bag of toiletries to him. Fujio raised her hand to catch it and whistled. Chin-mo didn't know what to do with this guy who was flirting all the time, so he simply closed the door and locked the young man inside. Out of sight, out of mind. Fujio finally let out a sigh of relief. If the door was opened a little more, she would definitely be discovered. Exposing herself like this would make the Almighty impatient, but it was better than coming in directly. Fujio thought of this and looked at the shower gel in her hands. Then she raised her right hand and finally took off the last layer of the white tape. The person in the bronze mirror in the bathroom changed from a handsome and devilish young man to an extremely beautiful girl. She had the same silver hair, but because of the pair of jade rabbits in front of her chest, Fujio's face looked even more alluring. Her figure was very good. She had long legs and a slender waist. Her back was pulled back, and one could vaguely see her flat abdomen. There was a rather deep waistline. Her jade rabbit was also very white and tender. Standing in the misty bathroom, the curve was very obvious. In fact, because it was too full, It gave people the urge to rub it. Fujio lay in the bathtub and closed her eyes, letting the water drip down onto her fair and handsome face. Her long eyelashes cast a shadow under her eyelids, and together with her silver-gray hair by her ears, there was an indescribable sense of beauty to her. If Almighty Qin saw her like this, Fujio had a feeling that the Almighty wouldn't let her off easily. But fortunately, she had developed well. She didn't let the white cloth wrap around her. But of her body she didn't of him. She was in the second half of the semester now, and she had already started puberty. She didn't know if the white cloth would still work when spring came next year. Fujio tilted her head. It seemed that sometimes being too big could be a source of trouble. She had to be more careful when she went out later. She had seen the pajamas just now, and they weren't very safe. She was afraid that even with the white cloth, there would still be a little bulge. Thinking of this, Fujio suddenly opened her eyes and pressed her silver hair with her left hand. Her action was still very handsome. Chapter 137. Qin Mo's attention was still on the business meeting. On his left was a transparent cup filled with water. On the other side of the meeting, Manager Feng felt very strange. CEO Qin's state today was obviously a little absent-minded. Regarding the esports selection contest, I have a new idea. Qin Mo opened his mouth after the business partner had finished speaking. With his Bluetooth earpiece on, he always looked more commercial and aesthetic than most people. Since we are looking for the most valuable new member, we can give up on the previous internal candidates and let them compete again. Give up on the predetermined candidate? The managers of the Qin's club looked at each other in dismay. Qin Mo's partner was a European. He lifted his lips and smiled helplessly. But Qin, you were the one who came up with the plan. That was the previous Qin group, not the Qin group that I took over. Qin Mo's voice was indifferent. Even in front of a business partner, he was calm and professional. Talents can never be selected through internal selection. I believe Robert has heard of this saying, mastermind in civil, the master is among the people. Hearing this, Robert's eyes lit up. He shrugged his shoulders and said, All right, Qin, you have successfully convinced me once again. With you around, the Qin family is indeed a treasured sword. Qin Mo slid his fingers. He didn't deny it, nor did he act humble. Thank you. Qin, I like your personality. Robert laughed. I heard that you've started playing on a private server recently, and he even went to a live stream room. Our teams are all very concerned about who had the ability to make you pay attention to a small stream. Qin Mo's expression didn't change at all. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, holding it between his slender fingers. He looked noble and upper class. It's not a matter of ability. That's my brother. Brother? Robert expressed his surprise. Secretary Liang was in charge of meeting minutes. Usually, he would sit in on these international meetings. But after hearing the word younger brother, Secretary Liang felt a little uncomfortable. President Qin, didn't you say he wasn't your biological brother? Why do you have such a doting tone even in a meeting? Robert was still asking. Qin, when did you have a younger brother? I remember that you're the only one in the Qin Corporation, right? God, brother. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. He's still bathing. Qin Mo glanced up and glanced at the clock on the wall. I'm going to check on that guy. That's all, good night. Robert was extremely curious. In his impression, Qin was someone who was hard to get close to. She really didn't expect that man to treat her brother so well. In the past, he did not like Chinese people, because some Chinese people would neglect their families when they had business. Now looking at Qin's appearance, he was even more certain that he would cooperate with the Qin Corporation to the end. The members of the club didn't have much of a reaction when they saw that. Secretary Liang, on the other hand, felt a headache coming on. The CEO had only known the young master of the Fu family for a few days, and he was already bringing him home for a shower. No, he couldn't let his imagination run wild. The CEO must have found a companion, because he had been living alone for too long. But even if he wanted to find someone, he should find a woman, right? Chapter 138. Secretary Liang was really in a dilemma. Should he call Madam or his boss? But what should he say if he called them? He couldn't say that Boss Qin was turned gay by a man, right? Different from Secretary Liang's active thoughts, Feng Shang, on the other side of the game, only thought that he was the most pathetic person in the world. So when his brother knocked on the door and came in, he didn't put away his laptop. He looked depressed and haggard. Manager Feng thought that his brother didn't have enough money in the game. So he immediately added 3,000 yuan into the account and asked, "Is it enough?" "No, it's not about the money." Even though Feng Shang stuttered, he still felt that today's incident was very sad. Feng Yi raised his eyebrows. "Then what is it?" Feng Shang was just about to tell his brother that he knew Spadesy. But on second thought, if his brother knew about this, he would definitely know that he had participated in the internal signing that day. Thus, he just shook his head and didn't say anything. Feng Yi, on the other hand, wanted to complain to his brother. "I'm going to be very busy from now on. I don't know what's going on with CEO Qin, but he suddenly canceled all the internal signings eligibility to join the team. If they want to join the team, they'll have to participate in this year's esports selection contest. I have to rearrange the plan, and I won't be able to go on a date at the nightclub in the future." I don't know. In fact, Feng Shang knew. He always felt that Almighty Qin's decision was to stand up for his idol no matter how he looked at it. Could it be that his idol was really taken away by the Almighty? The more Feng Shang thought about it, the more depressed he felt. He wanted to raise his idol, but why did Almighty Qin beat him to it? Fujio didn't know that someone wanted to raise her. She held a towel in her left hand and casually wiped her short silver hair. She walked out of the bathroom barefooted. The ends of her hair were still dripping water, and the water fell on her pale lips. Her skin was white and supple, and it was as clear as jade. From the bridge of her nose to her chin, she was impeccably beautiful. She was so clean that people couldn't help but take a second look. The young man had a lollipop in his mouth as he slowly walked toward Qin Mo. That lazy look made him look like a demon deacon in a comic, very handsome. After the bath, the youngster seemed to have become even more eye-catching. With such an eye-catching person around, Qin Mo couldn't continue with his work. He closed all the documents and placed the tablet at the side. He glanced up at the youngster and looked into his eyes. He raised his right hand. "Give me the towel." Fujio didn't resist the Almighty at this moment. After all, she was wearing pajamas. Her goal was to protect her front, so she handed the towel to the man. Qin Mo shook off the water droplets that landed on the back of his hand, his voice calm. "Lower your head." Fujio lifted the corner of her lips. The Almighty wanted to wipe her hair? Coincidentally, it wasn't convenient for her to wipe it herself, so she just handed it over to the Almighty. That way, she wouldn't expose herself if too many water droplets dripped onto the front. Thinking of this, Fujio leaned over obediently. Qin Mo looked at the furry head in front of him. He raised his right hand, but it wasn't a gentle one. After all, Almighty Qin believed that he should treat his younger brother the same way he treated his younger brother. A boy didn't need to be gentle with him. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.